And it's right. Thank you, Sharon, for doing those songs. Dare to be a Daniel. I've not heard that song since I was about 8 years old. And it is true when you think about what he has gone through. Ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be faced with challenges in your life. And you have to make the choice if you're going to do the right thing or not. From that one moment of that temptation that do you go there or see that or do that, to the major temptations that you face. Or even to the opportunity to share what you know. You're going to be confirmed. You're going to be challenged. Daniel is one of those examples of that. I'm going to show you Romans chapter 12, verses 1 to 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by that renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. You are going to be challenged. You, and only you, with that challenge as you face, have to decide how are you going to live. Sure, you're going to hear advice, messages, sermons, all these things. But in the end, it's only you. It's the end, it's only you. When we look at the life of Daniel, they were faced with major issues going on. Daniel chapter 1 verse 2 says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Think what happens here. Jehoiakim was a good king in Judah. He was the fourth last king of Judah. Jerusalem was really the only city left. Nebuchadnezzar besieged it. He won, but he left some Jews within Jerusalem. But he took stuff out of Judah. And that was basically, as you see, he took some of the vessels. He went to the temple of God. Remember the temple? And he took precious items out of the temple. And he took it out and he placed it in his treasury by these false gods. So let's think about this. Judah has not completely fallen at that moment, but it's going to very soon. And then afterwards, after all these happened, the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youth without blemish, good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge and understanding, learning and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. So think about what's happening now. Again, Judah hasn't fallen yet. It's going to fall in a bit. They're all going to be exiled soon, but some of them were taken away. Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, we've conquered, we basically have control of that area, but they haven't completely taken over for whatever reason, but we've conquered them. And let's take some of their special people, those young people. We're going to start at the young age, and we're going to indoctrinate these young people, these youth. We're going to indoctrinate them into our culture, into our beliefs. We're going to educate them. We're going to make sure that they abandon everything of what they knew before, their beliefs, their cultures. They're going to abandon their God, and they're going to follow our God. You see the manipulation? Where do you start when you want to change a society? You start at the youth. They weren't dumb. They knew what they were going to do. The king had a plan, and the people had a plan. So they took the special ones, the ones maybe younger, the movers, the shakers. They took those ones and they're going to use them. In fact, the movers and the shakers are going to be taught and educated so that they can be part of our society and influence everyone else. Does this sound familiar? A little scary, isn't it? And it's nothing new. This is what? This is 500 years before Christ. So this is 2,500 years ago. And they were planning it. That's what we do. Do you see why we as a church, our responsibility, I know we're all a bit more older, but our responsibility is to our kids. Kids, if your family's not showing you Jesus Christ, if the church is not showing you Jesus Christ, we're sorry. That's our job. Show Christ to the people around you. May our children, may our young people know the joy of God. We're fighting a battle. It's a spiritual battle. And it's manifested itself in the wonderful things that we face in this society. Think of this. They wanted the special youth, both of royal family and nobility, people of the movers and shakers, youth without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom. Without blemish, good-looking young people. You know? What do they do nowadays? Who do we admire nowadays when we look on social media and stuff? The ones that look good. Or on TV, the Kardashians and all the ones with all those nice appearance. We like good-looking people, don't we? With the nice bodies and everything, right? And that's what they were planning to do, because then they can use those good-looking people and people go, I want to be like them. After they've been indoctrinated into the society. But it wasn't done there, right? They brought them in, these youths, without blemish, good appearance, skillful, smart, endowed with knowledge, understanding, and learning, competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature, ready? The literature and language of the Chaldeans. Remember the Jews now? They have their literature and language, they had everything, and we're going to now teach them our way of life. But they're not just done yet. And the king assigned to them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine he drank, and they were to be educated for 3 years. And at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. So before we get to Daniel now, they were given food of the king, the special food, the food that they thought would bring him in. They were educated in their way. They were taught the things, and it wasn't done yet there. Their culture was ripped from them. As a side note, I remember when I was younger, and I shared this before, when I came to Canada, and I remember in grades 1 and 2, or kindergarten grade 1 and 2, my brother and I would used to go to speech therapy to get rid of our Jamaican accent. It worked. Why did they do that? Because they wanted us to be indoctrinated into the society. I do have an accent, of course. I'll use it with Jamaicans and stuff, but they wanted to make sure I could speak perfectly in this way. What do? You go to the kids, you show them, you educate them, and you start from there. Scary, isn't it? But it wasn't done yet. Give them the food. Okay, cool, let you go, good food. Now, among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. Tribe of Judah, these are the one specific tribe because they all come from Judah, that area. Now, what do you do? What's the final thing you do after you've indoctrinated them? The chief of the eunuchs gave them the names. Daniel he called Belshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. He changed the names. He changed their culture. He changed their dress. They changed their language. They basically said, you're going to abandon everything you know. And you are now indoctrinated into our society, to follow us. Highly intelligent, brilliant. I respect that because that's where you start. Where are the Christians, though, in our society now? Where are the people who are going to say, I'm going to stand for Christ regardless of what's going on? I'm going to be different than the rest of the world. I'm not going to follow the ways of this world or this culture. I'm going to follow Christ. And if that means my life is in danger or if I'm going to go to jail, where are those people? Here. Here. That's right. And I hope that's here. We have facing these challenges. Back then, I just wonder, because Daniel, apparently he was around 15 years old when he was brought over, when he was taken in exile. He was around 15 years old. Respect. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. A eunuch, his person's been castrated. A man has been castrated. They do it for main purpose so they don't go and touch the women of the court. For various reasons. So these are guys that are especially set aside. And Daniel was not going to be a eunuch. But Daniel decided, even though at the age of 15, 16, 17, he decided that he is not going to be totally inundated into their culture. He was not going to eat the king's meat. Respect. You think that's serious that means? Because there's implications here. Like, this is big. Like, he had to make a tough decision here. And it wasn't just Daniel, but it was his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the king's food. He was not going to eat that stuff or drink it. Therefore, he asked the chief priests, he asked and said, the chief of the eunuchs, I don't want to do this. And he asked, remember, it wasn't a command. I don't want to do this. I just don't want to do it. So that means he had to convince the chief eunuchs, who was going to face some very serious consequences if he didn't, I don't want to eat your meat. I don't want to eat your food. I don't want to go to that area. I don't want to smoke that thing. I don't want to watch that pornography. I don't want to have that affair. I don't want to go and have sex outside of marriage. I don't want to do those things. But come on, everyone is doing it. I don't want to swear. I don't want to lie. Do you see the similarities here? You're faced with that way. I always ask the question, what makes Christians different than the rest of the world? If you can't find that, then maybe you don't know that who Christ is, because you are called to be different. You have been set aside for Christ. The Bible's clear. We have been set aside for him to do his incredible work. And if you're doing the same thing, believing the same thing, this morning, I saw on social media in my area, someone had posted, I've just moved into the area, but the person said, I used to go to church, and this is up in Muskoka. I used to go to church, and they said, I'm looking for a church now, but I was hurt before. I want to find a nice church. And the person posted in social media, and they had about 115 responses by the time I looked. And it was interesting. People said, this church, or this church, this church. And a person said, there's this church which has views on the views on homosexuality, where they're very friendly to it. And the person responded and says, yes, I think I'm going to go there. And because they're opening and friendly and welcome, and he said, they'll accept me for who I am. Sure, of course, that's the purpose of the church. We accept you for who you are, but you come in here, we're going to love you into the kingdom of heaven. We're going to show you who Christ is. And there you can make that choice if you're going to follow him or not. Or there you can take your sin and just leave it at the altar and say, God, it's yours. I can't do it anymore. Please, Lord, clean me up. And that's what the challenge Daniel is facing here. Daniel said, and God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of eunuchs. And the chief of eunuchs said to Daniel, this is important. I lost my thing here. We can sing the song if we want. There we go. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, and this is how bad this was for the eunuch. I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink? For why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your age? So you would endanger my head with the king. What would happen if Daniel looked worse than the rest, the eunuch? He was going to lose his head. That's it. So Daniel had to convince this guy, I don't want to eat the food. And the eunuchs put his life on his hands for the sake of listening to this kid. There's a supernatural intervention here. Because, come on, they're not going to risk their whole life for this, right? He's not going to lose his head for the sake of some kid who decides, I don't want to eat that stuff. There's another thing here. Then you think about it from a dietary perspective. They were serving them meat. Meat is protein. Young people, young adults, young kids need protein. So if all of a sudden a young kid stops eating protein, that's going to impact their development, right? We have carbohydrates and protein. It's going to impact the development. Vegetables, of course, we are supposed to have our vegetables, but that's part of the whole meal system, right? You need your protein and your carbohydrates and other stuff as well. If Daniel's going to stop eating that, it's going to look different. And now I started to do some research on this because I think I had to understand how bad this was going to be. Daniel said to the stewards and the chief of the nation, as chief and the eunuchs, and assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Vegetables and water. Broccoli, carrots, potatoes, whatever. Roots of some sorts, right? A lot of carbohydrates and stuff like that. But they need the protein. So some vegetables have more protein than others, like broccoli has a lot more protein and stuff like that. I keep an eye on it because, of course, as you know, I exercise a lot. So what would happen if you don't eat that and you eat more protein? For a young person, they're probably not going to develop too well. And they'll show. Maybe they'll look a bit more meager. What would happen? Then I started thinking, in that culture, what, like the Roman culture, for example, they sort of liked people who had a little bit of fat on them. As you see some of the artistry, right? They're not chunky, but they had a bit of fat on them, right? Then that's the idea. I think, and I was trying to look at the artistry for that culture at that time, and I couldn't find anything. But apparently, I think they liked people who had nice-looking bodies. That's how it went. And it so goes in line with what it was saying in terms of the kids that they chose without blemish and stuff. They wanted people that looked good, maybe had a bit of definition on them. These kids, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, were not going to eat meat. And he put his life, the eunuch, on his life. So this is where the intervention comes. At the end of 10 days, just 10 days, okay? It was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. Whoa. I don't know. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. He said, okay, 10 days, these guys look better than the other ones, and they said, okay, we'll let them continue to eat. I understand the issue of diet, but I also believe that there was a divine intervention here. God did this. Now let's understand again. These guys were inundated into that culture. They were told to abandon their old culture and follow this culture. Every part of them was to be that. Daniel, at the age of 15, 16, loved God, loved his culture and everything. He said, I'll do everything else, but I just don't want to eat that meat. I'm going to follow God. At the age of 15, I would love to see young people like that, right? At the age of 15, standing up for God like that. And at this age, he decides, I'm going to do it. He calls onto God, and he says, I won't do it. God blesses him by lets the eunuch say, okay, I'll do what you say. 10 days later, he's looking better and finer than the rest. Right? 10 days. 10 days. And he says, just continue. And as for these youth, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions. And at the end of time, when the king commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them before Nebuchadnezzar. 4 youth, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel, they didn't just look better. They were better. They had more skill. They had more wisdom. Remember, wisdom is taking the stuff you know and applying it. And they had better understanding, and God blessed them with understanding dreams. Wow. Does this imply that if we in this society make these decisions to follow God, even though it may cost us something, that God will bless us? Absolutely. I don't know how he's going to bless you, but when you make that choice that you're not going to go there, you're going to say that thing, you're going to do that action as opposed to what this rest of this culture is, you're going to stand up for God, God was going to bless you. I will not say that you'll be smarter. Maybe you'll be more good-looking, but you're all good-looking anyway, so I don't know how we can add to beauty, right? But maybe God will bless you. If you decide, if you make that choice to say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I think about what Daniel, decisions he had to make. But he did it. He trusted God. So they come before Nebuchadnezzar. They're there doing the training for 3 years. So let's say he started at 15. He's now 18 years old. He's looking better than the rest of them. Him, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He's looking better than the rest of them. He comes to the king, and the king speaks to them. And among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired them, he found them. I love this cup running over thing, right? They weren't just better. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. All the kingdom. 10 times better. And Daniel was there until the first year of Cyrus the king. King Cyrus. What a blessing for a couple of young men decided, I am not going to eat the king's meat. I am going to follow God regardless of the consequences that I'm going to face. I'm going to challenge, I'm going to stand up for God, even if that means my life is in danger. Not standing up for a different political perspective. Not standing up for a person, but standing up for God. So I ask you, are you going to stand up for God? Are you, if you're facing some challenge right now of following Christ or not following him, or saying something or not saying something, going someplace or not doing something, not going someplace, what are you going to do? What decision you're going to make? Or perhaps God has called you to serve him in some way. Are you just going to let someone else do it? This is where you make that choice. You know, Daniel was amazing because when we learn a bit more about him, and I will be speaking a bit more about him next week, how much this young man, loved God. And he spent his whole life serving him. And by the way, he was not called into ministry. He was called into service. He worked for the government his whole career. He was a government guy. But he still followed God. They knew he was a believer. They knew he loved God. He followed. It wasn't the fact he was a pastor, minister, or any other thing. He followed God. He did a lot of incredible things, and we're going to chat about that. But just think of what it means. You don't need to be in ministry to say, I'm going to follow God. You just have to have that willing and giving heart. So what are you going to do? What's the challenge you're going to face? Who are you going to share Christ with? In your work situation, who should know what you believe? Or maybe if you're not working, in your family, with your kids or grandkids, Are you going to show Jesus Christ to them or not do that thing or go and do that thing? Are you going to put Christ ahead of everything? And just like Daniel, when you do, you will be blessed. Amen? Father, I thank you for this morning. I thank you for our youth in our church here. I do pray for our young people and the young adults here. May they feel your presence. May they know that even though this society is pushing them to do their thing, may they do your thing. I pray for us who are more seasoned. We still face so many things. May we run away from sin. And Lord, if we're suffering and challenged right now, may we call on each other and to pray with each other and to encourage one another so that we will stand for you rather than the world. May our arguments not be of these petty things in this world, but may our arguments be because I stand for Jesus Christ and nothing else, everything else is secondary. Lord, bless us today. Bless us this week as we call on you. Thank you, dear Father. Amen. Worship.